Welcome, everybody. As folks are coming in here on both YouTube and here on the two-way platform, thank you for joining the morning meeting here on Wednesday, September 4th, 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Sean and Tim and me to lead you through the day. We had a great session last night, which I'll be referring to regularly today because it was so interesting. But let's start by going through what's on the schedule today. There's a bunch of new polls out, and we're going to talk about that. But in terms of candidate events, the vice president is, as I'm obsessed with, going to New Hampshire. The media continues to seem to not be curious about why she's going to New Hampshire. And we'll talk about that, and maybe that will be revealed. But she's doing this speech at 2:50 Eastern Time in Portsmouth. And the campaign, very technically proficient, rolling out these small business tax breaks. I think it's textbook. It's from the Rahm Emanuel School of getting a 3-day story out of a bunch of policies that may well never occur and aren't particularly specific. But the coverage so far nationally has been very strong. We'll talk about that a little bit. President Trump, former President Trump, 5:30 p.m. in Harrisburg, recording a town hall with Sean Hannity that'll air on Fox at 9. Be curious to see if that's edited or live to tape. Tim Walz, 11:30 Lancaster, PA, and then a Pittsburgh event this afternoon. J.D. Vance, no public events today, in Phoenix tomorrow. President Biden, no public events, but there's a White House briefing at 1:30. Doug Emhoff, no public events, but tomorrow he is in L.A. doing a campaign event, and then Friday he's in Chicago. Bunch of polls out, and guys, I want to start with the CNN poll. Battleground state polls. They did 6 of the 7. They didn't do North Carolina for some reason. But again, I'll remind everybody, if you want to be in the conversation here, if you're on the two-way platform, please raise your hand. As always, we'd love to get some new folks in. We'll get to your questions shortly. But again, if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment, please raise your hand. So CNN poll, I would say on balance, better for Harris. She's ahead in some of the states, but they're all margin of error stuff. Strong in Michigan and Wisconsin, but still within the margin of error. I want to bring up what I found the most interesting about the poll, and Tim and Sean, ask you guys what you think. As we said along all the way, defining Harris is what's going to decide this election. They asked the swing state voters, whose views do you consider extreme, so extreme they pose a threat to the country, or you think their views are mainstream? So can we put that graphic up, please? So they said again about Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, are their views mainstream, or do they so extreme that they pose a threat to the country? And here you go. Harris does better than Trump on this question. And see if we can enlarge that, because that's going to be hard for folks to read. And that's actually not the right one. That's the horse race one. We want the close to swing voters on extreme. Basically, Harris does better than Trump. More voters in the swing states think her views are mainstream. And obviously, central to the Trump campaign's argument about how to win this race is that Harris's views are outside the mainstream. There's an article in the Washington Post this morning about reparations that says lots of people on the left want Harris to come out for reparations. She's spoken favorably about reparations for the descendants of slaves in the past. Her campaign, that's the wrong one also, I'm sorry. Her campaign wouldn't comment on it, which is unusual. So Tim, just talk about reparations first. They've repudiated a lot of her previous liberal positions, just anonymously aid saying she doesn't believe that anymore. Why do you think they wouldn't tell the Washington Post either that she's for reparations still, or at least studying it, or that she's against it?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that is generally the answer that you get on a question like this, is that it goes to Congress for a study. It doesn't get outright repudiated. But I do think the reason that they're talking about other things is because they have policy that they want to roll out that fits the frame that the CNN poll is talking about, which is what is policy like the small business rollout that's going to happen in New Hampshire today that feels well within the center of the mainstream, and how can they juice coverage out of that for multiple days? So I think what they're doing is being very disciplined and keeping their eye focused on the ball. Same with the price gouging and other economic policies that she's rolled out. She's really kept the focus on what's the white paper that I'm rolling out today, the next one. And there's a lot of discipline that comes with that. And I think that's also part of the chaos question, is the operation has been incredibly disciplined, whereas Trump is not.
but let me just ask again before Sean jumps in. Why wouldn't they respond, do you think, on reparations, whereas they repudiated fracking, repudiated a bunch of other previous statements?
I mean, they may be determining what the answer is there, right? Like there may be, I think, for fracking, for Green New Deal, for a few other positions, those were telegraphed really early on as attacks from the Trump campaign, as that these positions were too far to the left. They came up, as we saw in the interview with CNN, some answers there. So, they may be workshopping exactly what that position looks like. And it's still too, it's hard to say on and on that we are just 6 weeks out or almost 7 weeks out from the campaign launching, but that still is the truth in terms of them figuring out policy positions. So that may play into it as well.
All right, so here's the right graphic. Here's the right graphic, and you can see more voters think Trump's positions, you see there in the big red lines on the right, more voters think Trump's positions are extreme and pose a threat to the country than they think that about Harris. In all the states, and in some states by a pretty wide margin. And again, that must cause some folks in Mar-a-Lago who aren't bald to pull their hair out, because this is the whole ball game, really. Sean, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, first I would just say, I mean, this is an opportunity for them to, this is why the Trump campaign really needs paid media. I mean, she's largely unknown. There was a media research poll last week that showed 70% of Democrats and independents don't know enough about Kamala Harris. And I think this poll shows it. This is why there's the battle to define who she is and what she stands for on both sides. She wants to put out commercials like we showed yesterday. They want to put out commercials to show that she's nuts. And this is why it matters, because those battleground states show the delta that exists between a known quantity, Trump, and an unknown quantity, her. To your question about reparations, look, fracking, I'll work in backwards. Fracking made sense why she flip-flopped, right? It was, we need Pennsylvania. It's 19 electoral votes. So I no longer support it. And it was that was it, plain and simple. And I think that they felt like the environmental community wouldn't push back on reparations. I don't know what you would get. I actually think it was smart for them not to say anything. If you come out against it, you start to piss off some folks in the Black community. If you come out and say that you've changed and you're for it, you will potentially peel off some people in suburbia.
Well, just to be clear though, she's sort of been for it in the past. She's certainly been for studying.
But that's why I'm saying that you're just waking up a sleeping giant that doesn't need to be awoken. So my point is, I'll give them credit for this one, which is stay the heck away from it. Leave it, let it lie. Focus on what you want to, not what they want you to. I mean, this would have created, Trump would have made a big deal out of it. There would have been, interest groups on both sides that would have made a big deal out of it. And it takes you off message. So just don't respond.
I predict Mar-a-Lago will make a big deal out of it in the next 24 hours. That's my prediction. Maybe even in the town hall tonight, Trump himself will do it. All right. One more time to beat this dead horse, or maybe not, because she's in New Hampshire today. Do either of you know why she's campaigning in New Hampshire?
The state of small business, and they have gone to the epicenter of small business to roll out their small business. Yeah. I mean, so
it's really it's really just a national event. Couldn't have done it in a battleground.
Tax-free shopping. You get smoked.
All right. Last night on Two-Way, we talked about the fact that she's not really talking to voters, right? Forget talking to the press, whatever, and forget whether it's the right thing to do in terms of the country being able to see her interact with citizens in the context of wanting to be president. Tim, is there an optics, a word I try never to use along with narrative, but I will here. Is there an optics reason for her to talk to voters and in an uncontrolled situation like a genuine town hall? Or do you think she can and should just go through the general election, never actually talking to a voter in a risky situation where they could ask a hard question?
I mean, I think she could. I think it's possibly on the table that she does some sort of town hall. But I think the general question of what does it mean to talk to voters now means a whole bunch of different things. Is there some supreme value out of doing an unscripted back and forth with a voter that you don't get by holding a large rally, or you don't by doing some specialty media on a creator's platform on TikTok or YouTube, or doing an interview with the press? I also think there's a separate question of, it's not always directly the candidate talking to voters, it's also the campaign talking to voters. And so building up, raising the money that she's raised, building the operation that she's built, and having, for example, the office advantage that they have in Pennsylvania, in Georgia, in all of the swing states, the staff advantage, the organizing advantage, that's also talking to voters. So, when you're talking about how you spend your candidate's time, which is one person's finite amount of time, is there some value there? Yes. Has she done events like OTRs where she stops by, picks up things from a gas station, unscripted, interacts with people? Yes. Is there value there? But I don't think, Trump is doing anything above and beyond on the unscripted discussion with voters that makes him appeal, for example, more genuine or better connecting with people. And I think we see that, no advantage there reflected in polling either. So I guess it's a little bit of a wash to me. I think you can talk to voters in a bunch of different ways. And I think their campaign is fine.
So look, politics is always perception. And I'm getting concerned because it's 10 minutes in and I'm agreeing way too much with Tim. But politics is perception. As long as she's out doing things and people see her on television and there's clips of her at events, no one says, God, did she interact with a voter? And so to your point, Mark, should she be doing it? Is it good and healthy and a part of the process? Yes. If you can get away with not doing it, why put yourself in a situation where you're going to have a moment, as she tends to do, that can get mangled in a word salad and used against you? So, I mean, again, I hate to say this because it doesn't benefit our side, but if I could get away with what she's getting away with running a campaign, I do it every day of the week. As long as people think she's out there, and they see her on the TV or on the social media clips where she's interacting with people or speaking at an event, or, then they go, oh, she's out there. She's not, quote, hiding in her basement or something like that. So she's getting the best of both worlds. And I get why they're doing it.
All right. So over under for combination, the number of times she takes a hard question from a voter, planned, in other words, like in a town hall where they agree to do it, versus they subject her to it on the rope line and it's caught on cameras. How many times will that happen between now and election day? I'll say the over under is 10. Over under.
Either of those situations,
combined situations.
Yeah.
A voter, she's in an ice cream place and a voter says, why are you allowing the slaughter of Palestinian children? Or they have a thing where they actually, a town hall where they let her talk to voters. Will that happen 10 times more or fewer than 10 times?
Yeah. I think that's like one town hall and a couple side interactions. So I'll take the over.
Well, but it's got to be a real town hall. And I don't count like a town hall put on by Rachel Maddow to be a real town hall. I'm talking about where she can get hard questions.
Does Hannity count for Trump? Do we count Hannity?
No,
yeah.
I don't. No.
I will take optimistically the over.
The answer is less than 5.
Okay, fewer than 5. So once again, you guys have a dispute about the over under. That's excellent. All right. Trump's on the radio right now in New Hampshire. He will be shortly, so we may dip into that. But while we wait again,
Michael, our correspondent in New Hampshire, is telling us he's talking about the primary there. About how Democrats killed it.
We might dip in. So while we wait to maybe do that, let's start bringing folks in. Again, if you'd like to get in the conversation, particularly if you've never been involved, please raise your hand. We'll get you in. David, tell everybody where you are who don't know, who you're supporting and what's on your mind.
Thank you. You guys are great. A wonderful show. I'm from St. Louis. I'm a Trump voter. Can you guys talk a minute about the African-American vote? That knocked Harris out of the primary in 2016. She did so poorly with that group that she thought was going to carry her. And Trump, from looking on Google, they said he got 12% of the vote last time. I think that's just gold waiting for him. He ought to go into Philadelphia and the other cities and make the pitch for school vouchers, make this pitch for safe streets, talk about inflation and how with him, the economy will be, not was, but will be so much better and there'll be more jobs. And I think he could run that vote up to 18 or 20% and he'd be elected if he was able to do that.
He's done some of that, David, I'll tell you. And Sean might grimace when I say this, but Donald Trump's not that good at talking about school choice. For whatever reason, he doesn't have it down. But he has done crime events, and he did the Harlem event, and they certainly are counting on that. So Sean and then Tim, what do you guys think? Is that a real issue here, or with Kamala Harris in now makes it harder?
Yeah, I don't know. here's what I'll say. I mean, the circumstances were different running in a primary versus a general, because in a primary they're dividing up who's among the family, if you will, and now it's the default goes to her regardless. I think there's a degree of diminishing returns when it comes to that vote. Trump has done a lot more than any Republican, frankly, has in decades in terms of outreach and going to events and places. And I think there's a question is where's that ceiling? So I don't disagree with you. I wouldn't be surprised if down the home stretch he does a couple more events. They're particularly high on young Black men as a demographic to target, and I think they might do that more through mail and paid media. But I just don't know how much time he sees using his schedule to do that. And so like I said, the last thing is there's a ceiling that you're going to get as a Republican, and I mean Trump being probably the high end of whatever that is. I just don't know how much more there is to get.
Yeah. I mean, I do think there is a little bit making the comparison. It's like a backwards looking mirage to look at 2019 as obsessively as we do sometimes because it was such a different circumstance. I mean, Joe Biden had strong African-American support throughout the Democratic primary. And so every Democratic primary campaign you could look at and say, wow, they are really struggling with the Black vote, is because it was so consolidated for Joe Biden, and it's such a different environment now. And now we've seen polling show that as she became the nominee, she consolidated the Black vote, the young vote, the Latino vote. So, you know, could Trump make some inroads? Sure, maybe. I don't think it is a place for him to really gain a significant advantage. I just don't think it's going to happen. And I think a lot of polling, particularly digging into the crosstabs with Black voters previously, 2020, 2016, showed overperformance, and then that came back down to earth. And the Democratic candidate overperformed in both of those. So, you know, past is not a predictor of the future, but I don't think there's a lot of inroads for him to make.
A lot of veterans in that community as well that you advance with.
Yep. David, David, are you an attorney by any chance?
No.
Tim, I think you should copyright as quick as you can backward looking mirage. I think that's good. David, how'd you find out about the morning meeting in two-way?
I watched from the beginning. My son's a crony of Sean's. It's a great show last night. The best
last
thing
night was an epic episode.
Well, the best thing that came with the question or comment, the Democratic Senate candidates are doing so much better than Harris.
Yeah.
And by election day, that's unlikely to be the case. Does she improve or do they come back?
Well, I actually just
or it could still be the case.
I really the CNN poll is one of the first polls that I've seen that the presidential numbers are a little more aligned with the Senate battleground numbers. I think with the exception maybe of Jackie Rosen in Nevada. So I'm curious to see why that is. But I think the gap is shrinking.
And one way they aligned was they showed Carrie Lake doing much better than she's done in any other recent poll. So that was kind of confusing. David, thank you for joining.
Candidate out in Nevada. That veteran, why is she doing so well?
It's still a mystery to me why all these Democrats are doing well, but most of the Republican candidates are not A candidates. They're C or D so far, and the Republicans are in denial about that. David, thank you for joining. Appreciate it. Come back regularly. Let's dip in a moment to the Trump radio interview, but again, I'll ask folks, if you haven't been part of the conversation before, I'd love for you to raise your hand and love to bring you in. But let's just
believe
dip
it's going
in
to be
here.
close? Are you going to be the next president? Where do you see the final few states where it's going to matter?
Well, first of all, how unfair is that? Because I'm campaigning. I spent $100 million on fighting Biden. Everything's Biden. We didn't even know she existed.
More grievance.
And everything's Biden. And I end up winning the debate and winning the whole thing. And it's sort of like a prize fighter. He's losing badly, and they take him out and put a new fighter in, right? You know, in the middle of the round. Now, it's a very unfair thing, but I don't complain about it from that standpoint. So they put somebody else in who people don't know.
Denial of grievance.
She's had her honeymoon period. People are learning who she is, and now we're leading in the polls. But I hope that the people of New Hampshire realize that what they did to New Hampshire was horrible. For years,
on behalf
how many
of the people
years
of New
is
Hampshire.
it? I mean, just for decades and decades, New Hampshire was in that place in the primaries. Yeah. And they totally disrespected New Hampshire and threw them aside. I actually said when they do it, I said, well, that means you can't win New Hampshire. I just hope the people of New Hampshire realize what Biden and the Democrats did, and her.
Biden running against
Biden. She was a part
of
that decision. They threw New Hampshire away. And
Process
I don't
grievance.
think they should get away with it from the standpoint of New Hampshire.
I'm not going to go
And
that one. I
did
thought
the
was
exact
that's fair.
opposite. You know that because
Better.
I could have gone
So
with
it's
them.
best-
It would have made
best so
things a
far,
little
but
bit
still
easier,
ridiculous.
actually,
Yeah.
because you would have had
Yeah.
them both in the same place, same time, etc. You know, like it generally is.
Yeah.
And I didn't
Yeah.
do that. I said, nope, we're not doing that to New Hampshire. Not going to happen.
Yeah.
But
More
the way
process
they
grievance.
treated New Hampshire, I can't imagine that he can win New Hampshire. I just
more
hope that people
process
are going to
grievance.
remember.
Are we going to see you
More
between now
process
and November 5th back in New Hampshire?
Oh yeah, I'll be there. That's a very important place to me, and I think it's a very important place in terms of winning this election. It could come down to New Hampshire. I'll be there. I just hope, let them know. I just hope they remember they were treated so badly by the Democrats,
Process
but
grievance.
by Biden,
Grievance
and they
process.
were treated so badly
bringing in
by
Biden again.
you know, that combination
Running
of two
against Biden.
people. I just hope they
Oh my
remember
God, Sean! I don't know how you
because
worked for this man. He is
it
a
would be
mess
terrible if they
communicator
won New Hampshire.
and a great
I think New
communicator.
Hampshire's going to play a big role. I have a feeling.
Yeah.
Donald Trump, thanks for joining us live. Good morning, New Hampshire.
All
the
right,
Pulse
that
of
was
the Nation.
all
Thank
right.
you very
Thank
much,
you,
sir.
guys.
Hey.
Thanks for bringing that up. That was awesome. Jack Heath, a longtime New Hampshire political reporter, producer, manager, interviewing Donald Trump today on Manchester radio on the E or New Hampshire
With
radio.
Mark Halperin narration.
Yeah, I love annotating Trump radio interviews. It's one of my great
People-
things. All right, Lisa.
Just very quickly,
Lisa,
people do forget.
Lisa, who's
People
there?
do forget.
Lisa, who's there with you?
I've got my better half here, my husband Bill, also
All right.
a college graduate. We mentioned a couple of weeks ago. Same
Yeah.
alma mater as Sean.
Yeah, just since the previous participant mentioned it, Sean does not have friends. He only has cronies.
Understood.
Yeah.
I'm not
Lisa,
sure we would
remind
fall
folks.
in that
Remind
category.
folks. Yeah, remind folks who are part of our swelling morning meeting audience where you two are, who you're supporting, and tell us what's on your mind.
We are in Rhinebeck, New York, about 2 hours north of the city. We are both supporting Harris, and
I'm a little more begrudgingly supporting Harris.
yeah.
Okay.
So just
Keep it up, you two, and you're going to get your own show on two-way. But go ahead.
perfect. We'll take it on the road. Just something quick that we thought might be interesting to share. Bill's cousin Dan is a professor at the Fletcher School at Tufts and writes regularly and has a Substack. And he put one out this morning that I dropped in the chat if it's of interest to anyone, because the headline we thought was fairly provocative. And it says, Kamala Harris is not a foreign policy ingenue. And he just sort of brings in a couple of bits of research and reporting that talks about her experience in the Senate and as vice president, and talks a little bit more in depth about what he views as her qualifications in foreign policy. And it just was of interest based on last night's conversation. And I remember John's commenting last night that he's not sure what she's done the last 3.5 years as VP. And he addresses some of that in the article. So.
Lisa, what's the most compelling piece of evidence in the article?
I have here. So he talks about, he just talks about presidents of the 2000s and their foreign policy experience prior to becoming president, of which he notes that Donald Trump had none. And he talks a little bit about it. But basically what he's saying is that her time on the Senate Intelligence Committee has earned her the praise of her colleagues, Republicans included. And he does bullet point a couple of pieces and references.
Lisa, it's a great topic. I just want to make sure. Do you have a question, or you just want to tee up that topic?
No, I just wanted to point out that we put it in the chat if anybody's interested.
I remember when I was covering Bill Clinton, and early in the campaign, they started to raise questions about his national security experience. And one of the first things they offered up, which if Sean or Tim had been working for the Clinton campaign, they would have vetoed, was that he'd been an intern on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee while he was at Georgetown. That was one of the pieces of data he marshaled. Thank you, Lisa, for that. Sean, Tim, what do you think of this effort to illustrate her experience and again, compared to the fact that most of the governors who come in don't have vast national security experience, and she was a senator and vice president?
I honestly, first of all, I mean, foreign policy, it's always been interesting because foreign policy has never been a big issue per se, but then tying issues to foreign policy. And so, for example, can you take terrorism and the threat of terrorism that comes from a chaos in foreign affairs and bring it home, right? There's a way sometimes to tie an issue like safety and security to what's going on overseas. That being said, I honestly don't. I'm intrigued that this is an issue only because I don't find anyone questioning her credentials on foreign policy. I mean, it's not really been an issue, and I think when you're vice president, kind of by default, you check the box.
Yeah. I mean, I do think we've seen Trump press a little bit, like what would she be like in a meeting with Xi, or what would she be like in a meeting with Putin? And so I do think, background on this, or this message being.
Isn't that more of a strength issue, Tim, than a foreign policy issue?
I think it's both. I think it's both. But Sean, to your point, yeah, it is the fact that you have, gone through a presidential administration, that you've been in the Situation Room, you've met with the National Security Council, you're getting the presidential daily briefing, you're getting all of that information and intake, you've spoken at the Munich Security Conference, you've interacted with allies. All of those things are, and now not in this situation because she's running against the former president, things and strengths and qualities that a vice president brings that an outsider never does bring. It is interesting. I don't think it's a particular weakness. I think by virtue of the fact, sort of the point you're making, that she is vice president, bolsters those credentials.
Yeah, and I think the other piece of really what struck me about it was, the article is about foreign policy specifically, but just the idea again that John was bringing up last night, that we don't know what she's been up to the last several years. There seems to be some evidence that she's been active and doing things.
Right, Lisa, thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you both for joining. Tyler, I don't want to bring you in now because we're close to the end of the program, and I want to bring you in longer to go. So please come back. But let's bring in Alex. Alex, tell everybody who doesn't know where you are, who you're supporting, what's on your mind.
Yes, I'm Alex in San Diego, California. I was actually supporting RFK. I'm debating. In California, my Trump vote doesn't mean anything, but the RFK, interestingly enough, I was hoping it'd stay on the ballot completely so that we could see what that would look like. Just more interestingly, voted for Gary Johnson in 2016 and Trump in 2020. For me right
Alex,
now,
Alex, why aren't you voting for Trump again? Then definitely.
Well, I did really my vote.
What's he done to lose your vote since 20 when you supported him?
Well, since the refusal to. It's the election denial thing. It's old. It's tired. I'm just sick and tired of it. And actually, the clip from New Hampshire is just there's so many telling him what he needs to do, and he knows what he needs to do, frankly, and he just can't do it. And it's just driving me nuts. I think based on Kamala's strategy, it's hers to lose. My question, actually, two questions. One is John Ellis Substack. I love his newsletter, news items, and what his contention is if Trump wins 48% of the vote, period, he's a winner. It just doesn't. Yeah. It's the way it's going to play out. Second, so what do you guys think of that? Right, 47 is what he got in 2020, and he almost still won, but it's probably a loser. Anything less is a loser. My question is, I think Kamala's is to lose. The only way she loses is the debate. What are the one or two things, or what does she have to do to actually lose that 3 to 5 points that she's got a bump and is held, and she will hold by staying in the basement? Is it word salad? Is it a cackle? Is her getting really angry? Does it have to be something really substantial? What do you guys think?
Yep, Alex, thank you. On the polling question, John Ellis, very brilliant analyst, as Alex said, he said 48 and above, the national popular vote, Trump wins. 47 on the bubble, 46 and below likely loses, although it's not a sure thing. And obviously it depends. We still don't know in these individual states how well the other candidates will do, Green, Libertarian, et cetera. So those numbers, I don't know if John means those numbers in the multi-candidate or in the two-way, probably multi-candidate, I assume. We must mean a multi-candidate. I take it back because he's going to win below 50. But I do think that John is roughly correct. I think a little variation. If he gets 48, he's almost certainly going to lose. But I think he could still win with 46. And maybe even 45 nationally, depending on the distribution of the battlegrounds. But 46, 47 is certainly the bubble. Sean, Tim, what do you guys think about the debate? Sort of what as we say in the vernacular, what does she need to do or not do to win the debate?
I think it's a combination of both. I think if he can do well, as I said, I spoke to him Friday. I think at least he knows what he needs to do. Whether he does it and executes it is quite another thing. But it's a combination of what he does and what she does or doesn't do. So if she looks contrived, inauthentic, I don't think that CNN interview helped her. Might have been a push at best. But if she has another performance where she looks like she's contrived or inauthentic, and he comes off he has a great night, that could be a pivotal moment. This is the first time they're going to see them really together. You're going to be able to contrast them. And so I believe that there's a huge opportunity at this debate for him to excel and her not to. If it's a push, that's good for her. If he goes over the top, that's good for her. I mean, but to me, this is the one moment where there's not going to be another seminal moment between now and election day, and early voting has at least will have started on Friday in North Carolina. But so to me, this debate has an outside effect, and it's not going to be just who watches the debate. We've talked about this before. The residual effect, the clips, the discussions that stem from it are going to matter in a way that it hasn't mattered before. There's no next debate right now, and that's important to know. I don't think there's going to be another one.
Yeah, I mean, I do
Tim,
think
if you were with her in the hold right before she went out, what would you say to her? Like last instructions.
This is your environment on the debate stage. You're a prosecutor. Go prosecute the case. I think that is really a strong place for her to be walking into. I think Trump characteristically looks like chaos on the debate stage. I think she's very good at prosecuting. To the question of like what would have to change, I think the debate would have to go very poorly, not to be overly optimistic about the Democrats' chances, but I think she will do very well in the debate, fingers crossed. I think she would have to be knocked off of being seen as somewhat of a turn the page candidate, or Trump would have to really make it stick that her views are outside the mainstream and more chaotic, more dangerous, more extreme than his. CNN poll this morning that we just talked about shows that that's not the case. I think that would have to change. To Sean's point, I actually do think we'll get a second debate. I think we will get debate number 2. After
on Harris, the one point that I would make is she's always, the moments that we remember are always scripted. Her in a committee hearing that's scripted. Here's the line that you're going to use against the nominee or the witness. In the debate against Pence, I'm talking now, that was rehearsed. The attack against
the
Biden,
busing.
The Biden's a racist because of his position on busing. That was rehearsed. I am that little girl. That's why I'm saying if she comes across unauthentic, she's going to come in with 5 rehearsed lines. Trump's always excelled at the unrehearsed zingers, right? That line he had against Clinton, some of the moments that he had during the 2016 primary debates. If he comes across as funny and unreserved, and she comes across as staged and scripted, it's going to matter.
Yeah, but I think she can take Trump well. But I will also say, John, just very quickly, the other side of that is stand back and stand by, right? Like the unrehearsed for him, there's also an Achilles.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's why. Yep. All right.
Yeah. Alex, thanks for getting up early. What's the best internship you've ever had?
Best internship. Actually, canvassing, political canvassing, neighborhood canvassing.
Yeah, that is a good internship. Alex, thank you. Come back often. Thanks for getting up early. All right, so later today on this platform, a couple of events at 2:45 Eastern. We're going to do something that I love, and hopefully you will too. We've done it a couple of times. It's a two-way check-in. 15 minutes. I'll join you at 2:45 to 3 Eastern. Bring whatever news you see on Instagram, Twitter, on cable. I'll bring what I know, and we'll just compare notes for 15 minutes, and hopefully that'll catch you up in the two-way way that you want. And then at 6 o'clock Eastern, Lauren Leader, Majority Rules, is going to be talking about the Middle East. She's got Viva Klampus, Mandana Dayani, and some other guests to talk about what's going on in the Middle East. 6 Eastern, and you'll see both on Twitter and in my Substack. You'll see how to join both those events. But 15 minutes, two-way check-in at 2:45, 6 p.m. Lauren Leader, Majority Rules, and then tomorrow 9 a.m. Eastern Time, a very special morning meeting, which might be the last one in which we discuss why Kamala Harris went to New Hampshire, my week-long obsession. So tomorrow will probably be the last day we get to do that. Sean, what's the best internship you ever had?
I think the first internship that I really had, I worked in the Senate for George Mitchell, a Democrat, the leader. and got to just, it was kind of the coolest, it bit the bug, put it that way. I was like, I'm coming back to Capitol Hill.
Yeah, Tim,
I did canvassing for John Kerry
as an intern
as an intern.
when he was running for president
Yes. Does that make me sound
in
too
Minnesota?
young?
Yes.
In Minnesota.
Minnesota. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. I get emails all the time asking me if you're an intern on this show, and I tell people, no, not true. All right, thanks everybody for joining.
All right,
Michael
what about
Graham,
you? Answer the question.
Oh, easy for me. I was Abe Poland, the owner of the then Washington Bullets, offered me an internship this summer after my sophomore year in college, and I got to work for the Bullets. And I have a great story about Bob Novak and Karl Malone, which I'll tell on a subsequent episode. How's that for a deep tease?
That's good.
But the NBA draft, the first year the NBA draft was open to the public, and Bob Novak, who was a huge Bullets fan, came and really wanted the Bullets to pick Karl Malone, who they could have picked. Instead, they picked Wake Forest Kenny Green, who none of you have ever heard of. Anyway, thank you all for joining. We'll see you same bad time, same bad channel tomorrow, 9 o'clock Eastern time, right here on Two Way and YouTube for the morning meeting. Sayonara.